Hola todos! Here at Astarspanish, we make a ton of GCSE revision content. But a question I get a lot from parents of younger students is should their child take Spanish as a GCSE in the first place? I'm going to talk about the pros and cons about this in this video and show you some opinions from other past students. But please keep in mind your GCSE options aren't all that important. For example, I took GCSE history when I did my GCSEs a few years ago, and I haven't used or thought about what I learned at all since I sat my exams. GCSEs are really just a stepping stone for your next step, which is usually A levels. So, I'm going to first mention the fact that Spanish or a language is compulsory in some schools, especially if you're in a higher set for Key Stage 3. Although, with that said, you can go against your school's recommendation and not pick Spanish because your school can't force you to sit certain subjects. One reason schools do push Spanish is because of EBAC, which is essentially the government encouraging students to get GCSEs in the following subject combinations: so English, maths, science, history or geography, and a language. So in school, you might get 4 options at GCSE, one of which they recommend to be history or geography, another a modern foreign language, and then the other 2 would be completely your choice. In my case, my other 2 were design and technology and computer science. But if you do get a choice, let's go through the pros and the cons. A pro you might not think about is that the speaking exam for Spanish is set in April, so a lot earlier than all of your other GCSEs, which will sit from the middle of May to the middle of June at the end of year 11. Although Spanish has 4 papers, and they are all worth 25%, at least one of them is done nice and early. 4 papers is quite a lot though, so just to compare, computer science has 2, history has 3, maths has 3, but all languages have 4 if you're doing the standard AQA or EdXL specifications. It is slightly different for IGCSEs. Most of you would have been studying Spanish since year 7, but you can totally study this GCSE from scratch. So recently or last year, I taught a home educated student Spanish in 1 year from scratch, so it is totally possible. It's important to note that Spanish is easier than French because of the phonetics. The phonetics of Spanish are closer to those of English than French, which has much harder sounds to pronounce and loads of silent letters. Spanish is also quite a common subject, so there's about 130,000 students, give or take, that sit Spanish every year. And for comparison, there's about 800,000, again, give or take, students that sit maths, GCSE maths every year. People also will tell you that Spanish will open loads of doors for you in the future, and teachers say this a lot, but it's not really true. So, of course, learning a language is useful and it can be incredibly useful. Just sitting a GCSE in it won't get you very far. Unless you keep at it after you finish the GCSE, which I do recommend, you'll forget all of it by the time you enter the world of work, where it could have maybe been useful. If you're wondering how fluent you can get by studying GCSE Spanish, you will get a good, or you will learn a good amount of common vocabulary, but you won't be able to deal with real situations with natives, especially if you don't get lots of speaking practice in. You'll find that reading is your easiest skill and speaking is your worst skill. Some schools will offer a MFL trip for this, so that can be a good reason to take a language and be able to use your skills in, for example, a Spanish-speaking country, but definitely don't get your hopes up that you'll become anywhere near a fluent speaker after a GCSE in a language. As I said, you would need to put in lots of effort to keep up your Spanish after GCSE to not forget it. Even after A-level Spanish, you won't necessarily become fluent, but you will definitely get a lot closer. I've got another video talking about sort of picking A-level Spanish, which I will link below. Okay, let's go through some opinions of past students, and I've taken these from Reddit. This one says, I know a lot of people who carried on with both, which is in reference to Spanish and French, and all of them tell me Spanish is way easier. I do Spanish and I find it pretty simple to improve at. So I do personally think Spanish is easy to get better at, and it might not click for everyone, but I would say it's a simple subject and easy to revise, but of course it's not going to be easy for absolutely everyone. But have a look at a GCSE exam paper and you might surprise yourself. This comment says, if you're genuinely interested and you think you will like it, go for it, and perhaps you can build on it in the future. A language is always useful, especially one that a lot of people speak. However, if there is another subject with better opportunities and you aren't really interested in Spanish that much, pick something other than Spanish. If you're going to study a language, Spanish is definitely going to be the best one because it's just so commonly spoken in like 20 countries and it's the second most spoken language in the world after Mandarin Chinese. But you get a limited number of options at GCSE, so there might be another subject that would be a better choice for you and your next steps. Next, we've got my personal experience doing it is that it is terrible. It's the only subject which I'm just scraping a 4, and even though I attempt to revise it, the verbs and everything are too complicated. It always sucks to hear for me that people don't like Spanish or people are bad at Spanish, but I'm going to put some blame on schools and teachers for that. But anyway, no subject is going to be easy, so again, play to your strengths. This one says, I took French for GCSE. Honestly, if you're pretty good at languages, taking one is an easy option at GCSE. If you want to take it, go ahead. And there we go, I agree with that. And last but not least, this is in reference to picking Spanish because employers like a language. No, it's really not. Employers won't care or won't really care about you having a full in GCSE Spanish because they know the GCSE languages doesn't really mean much. It's only really impressive knowing a language beyond GCSE. Take what you enjoy. I took French for similar reasons, and it ended up being my worst subject by miles. Definitely not worth it. It is a myth that languages are automatically preferred, because frankly, GCSEs aren't hard enough where it becomes impressive. I highly recommend you speak to other people and get their opinions. Whatever sort of options that you end up picking, the grade is always more important than the subject itself, which is why everyone recommends picking subjects you're good at. If you have any questions about the GCSE or options or GCSE Spanish, please ask your teacher or email me. My email is always open. I hope this has been useful and it's an honest take from me. Vale, adios.